3, 2, 1.
This is The Jungle, an up-close, unvarnished look inside leadership and business strategy. We wade into the real-world leader's face and explore what they do to create a path forward, because that's what business is. Wild, exciting.
It's The Jungle.
Derek, we are back in the jungle.
Yes, great to be back, Doug. I always love being here. It's a great time to be in the jungle. Human flourishing in the jungle. We are building capacity and capabilities as we go, with energy, with flower, empowering energy.
We had just an absolute terrific guest. We had Jane Dutton. She is the Robert Kahn Distinguished University Professor Emerita of Business Administration and Psychology at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. So Jane is absolutely world-class, a world-class expert. Her research and her expertise is really at the intersection of strategy, management, organizations, psychology. She has played, I don't know how many distinguished awards she's won in our field of management, from research on strategy and sense making, on identity. She's done amazing research and was a founding kind of figure in this whole movement of positive organizational scholarship, which there's a Center for Positive Organization. So shout out to the CPO there at the University of Michigan. And that whole movement is founded on this premise of how do we look at strengths, resources, capabilities that bring about human flourishing in organizations, and that if we create those conditions, we're going to create not only successful organizations, but allow people to live great lives at work. Jane, I could go on and on. She's my academic grandmother. I feel blessed to be in that family tree. I go down once a year to speak at her class. She is just, we could talk all day, right? We could have kept going on that podcast just all day long. Just a really, really insightful thinker. And I always walk out whenever I make that trip to Ann Arbor, or I see her at a conference or in this conversation, you always walk out feeling better and feeling like you have a mental shift on how you are seeing the world. So a really, really great guest. What were your takeaways from that conversation? Hard to pick one. Where do you start on that conversation?
Wow, talk about provocative conversation, right? Education's doing it wrong. Businesses are doing it wrong. Lots there, and she also has a wonderful calming presence about her too, right? That just makes you feel good. So shout out there. I'll go with what I took away from the call, which was learning the need for organizations and leaders to really think about how to create the energy, the energy for meetings, the energy for gatherings, the energy out of people. From this positivity. It doesn't mean you ignore if there's any negative trends or bad things happening, or you're not in a realistic way, but you are creating energy first. And the point of that energy, you are making massive design bets with every single meeting, every single interaction. Think about how hard that is to reframe in your brain that you now have to take every meeting interaction so seriously, and you have to make a design bet on that. And the reason you're making that design bet is to tap into the free resources of human flourishing. That's kind of how I summed it up. That if you want to go down a meeting agenda and tackle some of your biggest issues as an organizations or opportunity, you want to make sure that everybody's operating at full capacity when you do that. So every time you have a meeting, your first job as a leader is to make sure everybody's operating at full capacity so you can build the capabilities that you actually need. How many meetings are people in where it's just like, you're bored?
Almost all of them.
Yeah, I'll show it to Dan Jeffries, because I use this one. He called it the Eeyore principle, right? From Winnie the Pooh. You're just like, there's no energy, no emotion, and you're bringing everybody down, and you're walking through like critical tasks, but no one's got the capacity, the energy, the capability to get there. And that's really a design bet and a leadership thing. But then you're talking at like the character of people and giving that energy to people. And if you do that, then you tackle all your issues, not or skip over that part. So it's really important to have energy, as you approach things. So because you're just going to get better results in the end, and it's free to do this. I push for that on the free because it takes a ton of mental energy for someone like me to think through that, as opposed to just going on to the next one of my 15 meetings today and just ripping through it. So, but that's a huge takeaway.
Yeah, and it's like I look at my notebook here, and it's I just there's so many points I could build off on that in terms of. I took 5
pages of notes, Doug.
I mean, and you're right. I mean, down to like the more foundational notion that universities are broken, and businesses and organizations at foundational levels, societies not having well-being measures. I mean, this is really, really foundational stuff.
And businesses are missing out by not doing it, but they're also making everybody's life worse.
It's a both.
Instead of being a place for empowerment and self-actualization and growth, they're a place for negativity, boredom, and it's hurting not only the business but the individuals' lives in the process, which was very profound to think of, right?
Yep. I mean, the one that I'll kind of do 2 in 1 here, but I really like this. So kind of drilling into building off your insight is how do you approach these meetings? And she talked about 3 kind of buckets of things to think about. One is on building positive connection. The second one was around positive emotion. And the third one was around trying to find positive meaning. And I'm going to experiment with those 3 today. And just see. I mean, that's the other thing that she said. I mean, that there's a certain amount of experimentation that you can try on these things, and they're free. So to your point, some of these things can be really, really planned, but other things you can just kind of trial and error your way into things. So go ahead.
Here's a real tactical trial I would try today, Doug. I bought all the students that work for our center for our meeting today matcha, so we can bring back the matcha shots to start the meeting.
You bought that?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm thinking about the beginning of meetings. So I bought everyone Rishi sweet matcha tea to start the matcha shots to begin our meetings to create some. I'm trying. I don't know if it'll work, but
so that's funny. So backdrop to this, friends, all the listeners out there. So I got this. I love Rishi tea. I talk about it all the time on the podcast. I just got a big order of Rishi tea. And all of a sudden I got this other thing from Amazon. It was like a Rishi matcha, sweetened matcha. And Kristen said, "Did you order this?" I said, "No." And so I was wondering, like, maybe I ordered that by accident. I'm looking back through my Amazon order, didn't see it. I looked
so Kristen's getting mad at you because you're spending too much on tea.
Yeah, because I got like four boxes of this matcha. I'm like, man, I'm going to try this. And Kristen's got a foam thing, a foamer, coffee, creamer foamer. I'm like, I'm going to foam some milk. I'm going to put some matcha in there, and it's going to be totally dialed in. And I was thinking about doing it today. That's fun. That's amazing. I didn't know that you sent that.
That I sent it to every one of our students, everyone that works for the center. So when we start the meeting, we're going to start with matcha shots to bring some energy.
That is smart. So you say that you're not good at this, but that is really, really good. So
that's taking her trying something, right?
That's trying positive energy. That's trying, and everybody needs positive energy during this time because it's so challenging. So yeah. Hey, plus, thank you, buddy. That's great.
Plus, the matcha is going to give you some fake energy.
True, but it's going to have a little bit of that theanine, which I like. I'm going to, but back to the takeaway. So connection, positive emotion, positive meaning. The one thing that I think something I'm going to try is beginnings matter. And she talked about the importance of setting those initial conditions for what happens later on. And so that first part of the call, is it silent? Like what's being said? What is it on time? What are the things that kind of create a little bit of that initial condition for the energy to be there, or the space to be there for the creativity to happen, the thinking to happen, all the things that you need to have to get done. So beginnings matter.
Shared matcha shots. Look at that connection
boom. I love that.
Boom. Just like that.
Yeah.
On today, the first meeting we're going to do it is today it's 10 o'clock right now, 10 a.m. It's going to be at 1 o'clock today. So
that is the world's record for implementing a recommendation from the podcast. It's like 3 hours later.
Yes.
So without further ado, we could banter all day and we could talk to Jane all day. I mean, so many really important insights. Just so appreciative for her joining us. And we hope everybody enjoys our conversation with Jane Dutton.
The Jungle is produced by the Center for Principled Leadership and Business Strategy in Western Michigan University's Hayworth College of Business. Our center supports the leadership and business strategy major conducts large-scale consulting projects, and trains professionals in acquiring and operating small businesses. To learn more, visit wmich.edu/leadership center.
Jane Dutton, welcome to the jungle.
Yes, I'm so glad to be here.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
What do you have to drink today, Jane?
Not very exciting, just water, H2O, but my cup says I'd rather be at the lake, so it fits.
That's fitting.
Is there so let's pump up Michigan a little bit. Is there a lake that you like going to? Because I love Michigan. I moved back for the lakes and visiting in the summertime here.
Yeah,
do you have a favorite lake in Michigan?
Oh yeah, so many lakes in Michigan, especially the Big M Lake. That's where we spend our time. Not too far from where you guys are in Kalamazoo, but
on the Big Lake. So for everybody that's Lake Michigan and the west shore of Lake Michigan, if you're listening, is one of the most beautiful places in the world.
It is.
Most people don't know this, so we like to keep it our little secret, but it feels like you're on Hawaii some days when you're just on the beach and with your kids. And so
I was out in Boston doing my PhD. People would say, "Oh, you're from Michigan." I'd say, "Yeah," and they're like, "Oh, you guys have lakes there?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's like an ocean," but they don't. They then said, "We're like, is it like this fill in the blank lake in Massachusetts?" It's like, no, this is ocean. This is like west coast of California, cliffs, and the whole deal.
Surfed on Lake Michigan. I mean, that sort of tells it. Sometimes the waves are substantial.
That does tell, because when I lived in Texas, it was the same thing. I'm going back to Michigan for the lakes, and I missed that growing up. I grew up in Canada, but it was, this. They're like, oh, it's like Lake Travis in Austin. I'm like, no, that's a puddle. You can barely boat on that thing. But very, very different.
Yeah.
So this is Michigan, visit our lakes.
Yeah, but not too frequently. So this is a very special podcast. We have Jane Dutton, and Jane is my academic grandmother. So we trace our lineage in academia, right, to your mentors and your mentors' mentors and your mentors. And so Jane is my academic grandmother.
This is true.
And I feel honored to be in that tree is how I feel. Jane, it's interesting because if you talk to anyone in academia, they know Jane. I feel like if you talk to anybody in management and business, they know Jane.
I'm old.
It's not old. It's just, amazing contributions across so many different areas. And most importantly, probably of late is positive organizational scholarship. And we thought, what a great guest to have on, given the state of affairs today and how we think about positivity and resilience and all of those things around what makes organizations thrive and flourish. So maybe we just start off with what is, from your vantage point, looking out onto business and organizations today, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing a lot of suffering. I mean, as you know, I study compassion, so I study suffering a lot, but the level of suffering and the range of different things that are causing people pain in work organizations, caused by work organizations sometimes, but sometimes caused just by the general conditions that we're all living in. Just so much uncertainty, so much stress and distress that it's depleting people. I mean, that's the scary thing, is that core assumption in this pause perspective is that people need resources to act and to act well and effectively. And those resources, especially the psychological and physiological resources, are really being depleted at a rate I think that we haven't seen certainly in my lifetime. And at the same time, the conditions in many industries are changing. I mean, there's just massive disruption that's happening, partly enabled by technology, but I think other kinds of changes in the way that people are working that is again adding to the level of uncertainty and felt precariousness of work and of people's jobs. We certainly know that being in academia. I mean, who knows what education is going to look like coming out of this, even if we come out of it. I mean, this is major disruption to the educational sector. So, if you wanted to understand what people and organizations do under conditions of threat or adversity, this is the time to study it. At the same time, I got to say, there are major opportunities that have opened up at this time. I think that, I think I'm on the board of directors for Kelly Services, and through that lens, I'm able to see at close range how new capabilities are being revealed under the conditions of adversity and threat. So people are rising, groups are rising, new innovations are arising at a much faster rate, I think, than before this time of extreme adversity. So I like to think about, the level of stress is deeply, and depression and anxiety and all those kinds of things is deeply distressing. On the other hand, I think it's really important to keep our eye on what kinds of new opportunities are arising at this time.
When you start, so maybe for some of the listeners who don't know about positive organizational scholarships, maybe they've heard about positive psychology, maybe. What if you put those lenses onto our situation, what then do you see?
Yeah, the lens, a core assumption or a core assertion of this perspective is that you can unlock resources in people and in collective groups by designing certain conditions that foster human flourishing. And what we mean by human flourishing is this state of optimal functioning, where both your body, your mind, everything is working kind of at its best. And it's never that people or systems are in consistent, always states of flourishing, but there are these moments of flourishing, or these stages of flourishing that build resources that we can access for the future, that inform what we can do in the future. So it suggests to leaders or managers, or basically, anybody, that you ought to keep your eye on, how can you design for these moments of flourishing that unlock resources that allow us to not only deal with the negative, the adversity, the harm, the stress, all those kinds of things, but propel us and uplift us towards a better future. And I get really passionate about this because I feel like our current ways of approaching situations, which are primarily problem-driven, are actually creating conditions of further depletion for people. And what I love about a positive organizational scholarship perspective is it gets you thinking about changing in directions that actually replenish, revitalize, and resource people for a better future.
So what would that, because it's so easy to say, look on the situation. I do it all the time in my work or family or whatever. And you're like, to your point earlier, like there's disruption, there's stress. It's so easy to cue into the negative, the challenge. And then you see people, we're seeing in some of the businesses we work with and universities even, that with that negativity kind of comes, let's preserve the status quo. Let's not think about the opportunities, the innovations, the hope, the optimism. So right. How do you as a leader start to make that shift from more of this problem, status quo, deficit to opportunity, resources, hope, optimism?
Well, first of all, it doesn't mean denying the negative. So it's really important to acknowledge the fact that things are really hard, that people are depleted, that people are suffering, et cetera. So it doesn't mean looking away from that, but it means augmenting or complementing that with a disproportionate amount of positivity. And this is not just, happy, sappy, unreal things. It's about real generative positive conditions for people. So let's just use the example of a Zoom call. We're on a Zoom call, we're in a podcast. How could we reimagine, these routines that we're part of, let's say Zoom calls, in ways that actually resource people more, so that you not only have a meeting where people are showing up and are more resourced, that is, they can think better, they're more creative, they're more energy giving, blah, 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 But even when they leave the meeting, if you think about them as a flower, they come into a meeting and they're like this, the meeting is so energizing, they're like this, and then they leave the meeting and they are an energizer to other people. Well, the pause perspective helps us think really systematically about what are at least 3 buckets of things we could do to reinvent a Zoom meeting so it was more generative, more life-giving, more energy producing, more creative, basically more effective, like puts people in an optimal state of functioning. And at least the way that I see it, the research suggests you could make 3 bets. One is you bet on, in that Zoom meeting, creating higher quality connections between people. And that might mean, for example, the way we started out, where we're bantering, personally, we're not just getting to the task of doing this podcast, but we are actually forming connections between each other. I know you, Doug, but I don't know Derek. So, we started out, and first moments matter. And we created a more positive connection at the beginning, which is actually making us more capable and more effective in the meeting. So you bet on positive connections. You bet on positive emotions. And so you try to genuinely evoke feelings like excitement, awe, pride, joy. These little moments of positivity that actually change physiologically our capacity to think and to respond and all those kinds of things. And then the third bet would be about positive meaning. So how could we have conversations or structure the meeting so that we tap into, for example, positive meaning about ourselves, so our strengths, or positive meanings about our jobs, like what are we doing as professors right now that it's actually, making a difference for students, or positive meaning about the organizations that we're a part of. So for example, the new center that you have, how can you tap into the meaning about being part of that center that actually resources people? So that was a long-winded answer.
Well, I have a question right off that one because
I have one too.
Go
ahead.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
so you guys are steeped in this, so I think we're getting a little. Our listeners need to grasp this. This is a pretty hard concept because Jane, you said resources. You need to provide employees resources, right? And I don't know if employees is the correct term, but to optimize a state of human flourishing. Let's use that.
Right.
So we lead the center. We challenge with this. Leaders are faced with this. I think when people think resources, they think technology and what you guys are talking about is, I think, like mental frameworks or leadership tactics or things like that. So, and you got really specific on some of those with a Zoom call. So,
yeah, can I just make sure I clear it, because it's a really important point.
Yeah.
I'm really talking about human-based resources, renewable resources that actually do not cost money and do not use material resources. So I'm talking about resources like trust, resources like energy, resources like hope, resources like optimism, all of which allow us to function at a higher state. So you have to, one thing a pause change maker or leader needs to do is think more expansively about resources. And you have to believe, which I totally believe, that actually if you unlock through people's experience more of these resources, people do better work, as well as being in a better state. So they are healthier. I mean, you could talk about economically, your healthcare costs go down, but you're basically flourishing means I perform more effectively and I'm healthier in the moment.
So that's good to clarify for the listeners, because I think that was a
sorry.
point. It's critical because I went to technology. Doug's the experience side of our team, and I'm more of the numbers analytical side of the team. But what I really like this because we're in such a challenging time. I'd imagine that you guys are developing in your center new capabilities for what this looks like virtually, and then what it might have been as you gathered together when that was once a thing we could all do, and then it's virtually, and then the uncertainty on the outside of this. how much of this virtual will stay or leave, I think is something that leaders want to know. And then very tactically, what should we be doing today, right? Doug, always harps on me that my meetings aren't good enough, or that I'm not bringing enough energy, or that I'm not, and that's just
that's
not who I am.
that's not true. That's not true. That's not
So
true.
how does someone that it's not maybe authentic, I'll use that term for them, approach this topic and start? How do you start? Do you just call your center and say, hey, start here? Or like, what's some things we can do off the bat for someone like me?
Again, there's all kinds of things I could give you to read, short things, long things, all those kinds of things. I mean, it really is about, I mean, I called what I just went through the flourishing triangle. It's really as a meeting convener, or as a teacher, or as a leader, anybody who's bringing people together, you have design choices about what you're going to bet on that's going to allow the meeting to be effective. And I'm just saying, whether we're talking about meetings or we're talking about any kind of social gathering of human beings, virtual or in person, you can bet on these conditions of more positive emotions, more positive genuine connections, and more positive meaning as all being resource building for people. And instead, we spend a lot of time, with agendas and thinking about tasks and all those kinds of things. Those things will get done better at a faster rate and a higher quality if you design for these conditions where human beings are at their best.
So let's take a
How many leaders don't do that? How many bad meetings are there because leaders aren't doing that? Because I've never done it.
So this is what gets me so excited there, because
I figured so, because I don't do it well.
This does not cost money. In some ways, it's this is not, it's earth-shattering only relative to what we currently think works. And again, I'm so enthusiastic about this because I'm so scared. I'm very scared that our current theories of practice, as what we're teaching leaders, I will say, and what leaders see as kind of normal practice, is actually depleting people and making them way suboptimal. When if we really understand, and the thing that's so cool is neuroscience, as it's helped us understand actually how our whole body works. The fact that these conditions are resource producing or life-giving, that would be another way to talk about it to people, is rooted in what it does to our bodies. So if we have more of these high quality connections, again, this from having babies, we are born to connect. We don't only feel safe and willing to take risks, et cetera, if we are connected. That is an investment in people being socially connected in a way that allows them to speak the truth, to bear up, under pressure, to be creative, all those kinds of things. So I get passionate about this because I feel like the way we are managing organizations is actually, making our decline faster. And the beauty of this is it doesn't cost money. It just means changing people's paradigms.
All right. So I have a great question that I want your expertise on.
Okay.
And so, I study ritual, so I'm very interested in this and what you're talking about. You're speaking my love language right now, Jane. So, but what I find sometimes on Zoom calls is when you try to bring and provide space for this, silence, or students are, there's no sharing of emotion. The positivity kind of just, it's not there. There's nothing there. And you try to be like, well, you try to like kind of uncover what's going on, but there's nothing there. It's just flat. And so I find sometimes, even when Derek and I talk a lot about juice in our program, bringing good juice, bringing good energy. And sometimes you get on these, and for understandable reasons, people are flat.
Right.
So how do you come into one of those kinds of calls where you can't be like, all right, everybody, it's positive time, right? That's not going to work, but everyone's just kind of stuck. How do you move them out of that? Or how do you deal with that situation?
Well, I want to just clarify that it's not all about, like, energy can be an after effect of this, of people feeling we're in a very calm sense of aliveness. So it doesn't have to be this expressive thing. I think it's thinking about what's in your possible toolkit, beyond, for example, leading people in a ritual. Like, for example, I would say a really powerful tool in your toolkit is our questions. Like, what are the generative questions that you ask? And this is where the appreciative inquiry is so important. One of the most important ways that you can generate positive connection, positive meaning, and positive emotion is by asking really meaningful questions. And it may mean, especially at the beginning. Again, complexity theory, it's going to go, maybe it's too academic, but this idea that there are these initializing conditions in emerging processes, like as processes unfold, what happens in the beginning is really important in terms of what unfolds. So if you can ask questions in the beginning that are meaningful and that touch people, you've already unlocked resources. So for example, I start most of my meetings with a rename, where people use the rename function in a Zoom, and you put your name and then you ask a question, like something as simple as like, put down 2 words that describe something that happened to you this week. Saw daughter, fell down, doesn't matter. You're asking, you're inquiring into the good early on, and you're giving people a way to display where they are. And it just forms a different kind of connection. It's partly you're trying to affect the social tissue of the group. And so I think you have to try different methods of getting people, like Doug, with what you think about, kind of aligned and synchronized. I heard another another faculty member told me that she tried last week with her class. It was a class of 80 where they had, again, people were dead. People were just sort of like flat. And she had them stand up and do a tree pose together. So 50 people.
Derek would love it.
And then she named it. She named, we are a forest of loving trees. So she gave them meaning. So she did this behavioral thing, synchrony, where you have people tuning into each other. So they're seeing it. And then she gave it positive meaning, which, it just endows people with, wow, now I'm part of something like a tree. It's alive, it's beautiful. It's something. So I think we just need, it's partly a limits to our imagination of how we can try. We have to have experiment, different ways to unlock the life in a group. And we have to understand that people are really depleted. And so that effort, especially at the beginning, to get people so they're in a little bit more so they literally have some capacity to think and to act, becomes really important. And I think I just have to try different stuff. I mean, another example would be, this is something I learned from Chris Murchison. So what do you do if in a Zoom meeting, somebody says offhandedly, yeah, I just learned my nephew died from COVID. Or somebody I cared about just went into the hospital. And it's just, that's part of people's lived experience these days. What do you do on a Zoom call? And what Chris Murchison, this is an example of, again, through a gesture, conveying both positive meaning and positive emotion, says, okay, now everyone, what he does is, everyone imagine there's a pearl between your hands and you're rubbing the pearl, and then send love out to whoever that person was, by just putting your hand up to the screen. And again, you have this as a collective performance and people are doing that, but it gives people a way to react to the humanity that just unfolded in that conversation. So it's believing that if you do these kinds of things, if you take seriously that your part of your job is to enable these conditions of life giving, then the tasks are going to get done. And hopefully people will feel replenished and resource leaving, as well as when they're in the meeting. Think about most people are coming into meetings like this, and then the meeting takes them down even further. And then it's like, get me out of here, and they're going. So anyway, I'm talking too much.
So I think there's important points here, because you said it's free, right? And these are free resources. I think this kind of reminds me of almost of second order thinking, right? Most people finish on first order because it's too hard to get to second order, right? They can be lazy and stay in first order, or you can really challenge yourself and go to second. This, I think, for leaders is this. It sounds easy and free, which it does, but this is a really challenging and time-intensive thing to do, to make your bets, plan those bets, think hard about how you're going to create that energy. And how you're going to do it. I'm thinking through my calendar as you're talking today. I'm like, that's, 7, 8 calls that I'm going to have to really think hard about, make bets, set aside time to plan that. Right. So I think this takes a certain level of training too, because I tend to be a calm, I forget the word used, but a calm sense of alignment. And that's kind of who I am. But it doesn't mean I don't have energy. I have energy about topics. I'm more of a realist. So is that a challenge that you see in most of the leaders that you're working with, is
how
to spend the mental energy on creating these bets?
Well, I think one thought, Derek, might be, that the fallacy that you have to do it. Alone. And that we're training whole classes of 80 students around this stuff, and they're taking it on. It's like, it's not just the person in charge. It's, part of it is giving people the general idea that it's possible, and that we ought to be actually monitoring it, and it's a shared responsibility. So, for example, not now, I don't know if Zingerman's is doing it now in their virtual meetings, but Zingerman's sort of famous deli in Ann Arbor, or community of businesses, always sort of held out as a positive deviant. They have an energy meter on the wall. Their meetings have 30 plus people in them. Anyone in that meeting can go up at any time and make that meter go down. Say the energy is too low for us to optimally work. And then people will suggest a round of appreciation, or do something to lift up the capacity of the group. And that's an example where the responsibility for having a resourced meeting is distributed. It's not just the leader that's doing it, but people have to understand that what they're doing, that this is not just, we're all going to dance and be happy. What we're trying to do here is lift up the capability and the capacity of the group for optimal functioning. And, coming down on, really clearly managed tasks is when people are psychologically and physiologically depleted, is not going to help.
Let's maybe, we're almost out of time, but let's maybe do one more question around compassion specifically. So I feel like sometimes I think, am I really compassionate? Am I really empathizing as much as I should? Because I find myself at least sometimes thinking, are we just kind of being not strong when we can really be strong, and let's go, and not maybe really, and having a kind of not an inner battle, but a sense of like, I want to be compassionate, supportive, empathetic to what's going on. At the same time, I want people to be strong and know that they're capable, and that there's more, that they can do. And this kind of toughness, softness, compassion. How do you think about how leaders should approach that? Because I know that if you're a mindful leader, you're thinking about compassion. At the same time, you're thinking, I don't I don't want to let people off and let them not be strengthened by going through difficulty or challenge. So how would you advise leaders around that conundrum?
Well, first I would sort of say being compassionate doesn't mean being soft or weak. Being compassionate can sometimes be the hardest, the hardest, most difficult thing to do. And I think that, again, that could be a false trade-off. I mean, if you think about compassion as simply a healing force, and if people are wounded or in pain, in order for them to move on, they need to heal. And you are just one of the potential healing solvents, or healing forces in it. And it doesn't require that you do big things. I think that's also what stops people from thinking hard about being a compassionate leader. Is it oftentimes just means being present to the pain. So showing up, listening, caring. Again, the way our bodies are built, if even virtually, people can tell if people authentically care. And sometimes that can be enough. It doesn't mean that you have to solve it or, give, all kinds of extreme measures but it means honoring the pain and with the intention and the caring enough to want the suffering to be alleviated. So I think right now, the most important thing, especially in so many workplaces, is for leaders to be compassionate, because this is what people will remember. This is what's going to attach your talent, to your organization is actually, feeling like people really cared when I, was sick, or people really cared when my family was into financial trouble or whatever. That's what's going to attach people. Those are the story, or the absence of compassion is going to, again, whittle away at people's attachment or, their willingness to go the extra mile, etc. So I think it's really important to remember being compassionate is partly just about showing up and listening. But being compassionate has huge returns in terms of people's impressions of the workplace, their impressions of their boss, and their attachment and commitment to the organization. And the failure to be compassionate is, it's like trust. It's very hard to repair. And, the people that can leave will leave. So,
Derek, do you have any, that's, I could talk, Jane, I could talk all day and because this is so important, and it's such a skill set that for young people, for old people, that, to Derek's point around training to be able to see the world this way and to know just these little tips and tricks of bringing this into life is so important right now. We could talk all day.
I don't even know if I'd call it, maybe you can, before you comment, tips and tricks, I'd call it almost a mindset, right? Like as a leader, you are responsible for X, Y, Z, and you and your team can share that responsibility, but you need to create that type of mentality that around the capability and human flourishing to go after your opportunities or issues. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, again, having taught a lot of students and studying positively deviant organizations and positively deviant unit into organizations, it's again, at some level, it's really basic. People will say things like, I always knew this was true, but I just didn't want to bet on it because I was hearing other things, I had to be, I had to be powerful. I had to be whatever the story is about how you accomplish great things in organizations. This is really about be the best human you can be and unlock the best humanity in other people, and you will do amazing things. I mean, that's really what this is. And it just makes me hopeful, again, as a grandmother, and as someone really worried about these huge structural problems that we're facing. Our current solution sets are not working. And I really believe this is worth hugely betting on. And you see in other countries, they're making bigger bets. The United States is actually really far behind in many of these things. So as countries are adopting well-being indicators that go along with economic, other economic-based indicators of how good your society is doing, or Australia, New Zealand, like the things they're doing in schools is just are amazing. So they are teaching little kids on that this is the way to be and think, So, I think we can look to other places for grounded hope and the difference that this perspective or this mindset can make.
I have one more provocative question, Doug.
Do one more, and then we'll go rapid fire.
So I agree, and Doug and I have had long conversations as we build our center about this. The purpose of higher education, I think it's shifted personally way too much to technique and tool, and not anywhere close enough to the individual, the person, the human flourishing, the character building, the mindset. What's your thoughts on that? It seems like you guys you've pushed way further down the road than we have on this topic, but most schools will shy away from anything that has to do with the individual person or character or mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there has to be radical transformation. And I also believe that, so one of the other findings from this perspective is that really flourishing organizations do the same thing on the inside of the organization as they're trying to do in the world on the outside. So even if we change our techniques for how to do education, we have to live as educational institutions in a better way, where, again, academe, for example, is not just an endurance competitive test, but academe is a place where you as a human being are growing and thriving and flourishing. And in that state, then you can be much better at helping students grow and flourish, and et cetera. So I'm repeating the work of Warren Nilsson and Tana Paddock, and they have this, they've shown in all these organizations that the organizations that have this correspondence between their way of being and what they're trying to do purpose-wise in the world. So your center, what it's trying to do in the world, you have to live it on the inside. And that wisdom of living it on the inside actually gives you whole new ways of thinking about what you can do on the outside. I can send you, actually, there's a great video that they made of people who are working in organizations like this talking about what their experience is. A lot of people have never been lucky enough to be in a place where people are truly flourishing.
It's so we right, Derek, we could talk about this all day. I mean, all day long. And to your point, Jane, Derek and I have talked about this recently, that if you can make some of those strengthen students in those ways, that they are more resilient and more courageous and self and pride, self-worth, that those factors are infinitely superior and more difficult to build than learn how to read an accounting statement, learn Excel, learn, fill in the blank tactic on information systems or HR or whatever it is, finance. Right. But it's a mindset shift for educators to attend to that at the same time you're attending to the skill or the knowledge area. But really, we see those students that go through that change, they're the ones that I think it's like they click in a different way. And that's the most rewarding thing, I think.
Well, and you're probably doing the best transformational work with them. I mean, again, in terms of 10 years down the line, will those people say I am better off as a human being? Not as am I better off with my job, am I better off as a human being from having had this experience in your center or in your university? Yeah. That's what you hope for. When we are in such an important industry in terms of making a difference this way, but the way universities are designed, I can't speak for yours, but I mean, I love the University of Michigan. It's really good at being a university, but the way universities are designed now, they're not necessarily set up to bring out the best in people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is we
can go on for
we could keep going. Let's stop.
Yeah.
Let's stop there. Maybe we need to have another episode maybe down the line. But let's end with some rapid fire questions. Are you ready,
Oh, okay.
Jane?
I don't know what the rapid fire question part is like, but I'll stand up to it.
All right, here we go. Favorite leader?
Satya Nadella at Microsoft.
Good one. I like him too.
Courage or compassion?
Compassion. With courage.
Okay. Speed or accuracy?
Speed.
Great ideas or great execution?
Great ideas.
A word to describe your leadership style?
Empowering.
Night owl or early bird?
Oh, early bird.
Maize or blue?
Oh my God. Both.
If you had a dangerous, our students refer to our program sometimes as the jungle, based on the Ray Dalio quote, you go through a dangerous jungle, you can live a terrific life, or you can stay where you are and live an ordinary life. If you had a difficult task that was like the jungle, who are you taking with you?
Who am I taking with me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my family.
Okay.
I mean, that's the most important thing in my life. So,
if you had to have one meal before you entered that jungle, what would you eat?
Lobster.
Okay. And if you had an animal that really embodied and illustrated your leadership, what would be your animal?
Oh, geez. I have no idea. I mean, just, I guess, a golden retriever. I mean, it's not an exotic jungle animal, but golden retrievers just see the best in anyone at any time. And I think that's my power, is that I easily see people's awesomeness, and that's a gift. That's not it's nothing I've developed. I feel like I was born with that. So that's why I feel like I've loved having PhD students, because I see their awesomeness. It's just not hard to see their awesomeness. And I believe it. I invest in them.
That's great. That's great. Well, we are honored and so appreciative that Jane, you joined us on The Jungle. Really appreciate your time. Stay safe and happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year and happy holidays to you both. And here's to replenishing and reviving and all those good things.
A better 2021.
That flower analogy is going to be stuck in my head.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I'm going to be thinking after every phone call meeting, did the person leave like this, or did I make them go like
yeah.
It's challenging. Thank you, Jane.
Okay.
Thanks,
care.
Jane.
Bye.
Bye.